Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of the
Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we are back with another edition of Age of the Realms. This is our series of Warhammer Age of Sigmar battle reports. This is battle report number 35. It is a 1,500 point battle that is fought between Death with the Esoteric Order of the Thousand Suns versus Commander CheapSkate with Lords of Azure Skies. So that's right, ladies and gentlemen, it is a Tzeentch Arcanites versus Stormcast Eternals Celestial Vindicators battle, and we're throwing it down at 1,500 points. This time we're doing a Duality of Death scenario, so that should be kind of an interesting one as well. We're going to have all of our armies kind of listed out here in a second. If you want to see exactly what the armies look like and take a look at what they're bringing, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this battle report on a roll. Alright, so with the army list over with, let's go and talk about the scenario real quick. As you can see, we are playing on a 4x4 table. The scenario is called Duality of Death. Pretty much what happens is that the objective is to control the two objective markers located right in the middle of the table. As you can see, there's one on the left hand side as well as one on the right hand side, right in the middle of the relative middle of the table for both armies to go after. The objective is to control both of them, and an objective is considered controlled if a hero or a behemoth is within 3 inches of the objective point. Once a hero or a behemoth has controlled the objective, the only way that they can lose that objective is if they are killed. So if you show up and your opponent already has a hero or a behemoth on that objective, you try to take it back from them. The only way you can do that is by killing those models. Winner, of course, is the one who has the most victory points by the end of the battle. Victory points determined by the number of rounds an objective is held. So for example, if your hero grabs one of the objectives, you get 1 hero point automatically, and then you get the same number of points per turn number as the turn. So for example, if your hero is still holding on to it by turn 2, that's 2 victory points. If he holds it by turn 3, that's 3 more added on top of that, and then that's how it's added up to that. So that pretty much makes up the scenario rules for this one. Okay, so let's look at the battle plan real quick. As you can see, we're fighting on a 4x4 table. My friend O'Death is deployed on the near side of the table, and I am deployed on the far side of the table. Pretty much my plan is to pretty much divide up my forces. I'm sending half of my forces to grab the objective marker on the left-hand side, and then of course I'll plan on storm striking in a couple of my units. I plan on sending in my Lord Relictor as well as my Executioners, so Lord Grim of Forgotten Lores, as well as my Paladin Retributors, the Executioners, to land right there on the right-hand side to take that objective. That way, I can secure both objectives within my turn, and that way I can start racking up victory points as well. I do have more hero options than my opponent does. I think I have 6 heroes while my opponent has 4, so this battle port is kind of more my favor because I have more heroes that can grab things, and I can take more losses than he can at this point as well. Once I pretty much do those 2 objectives, my plan is to have my enemy split his forces because he's going to want to try to take both those objectives as well. Hopefully he'll do that, and when he does that, my army can just take apart his army piecemeal, taking it apart by unit. The worst case scenario is if he decides to send his entire army after one of the objectives and attack en masse against my forces, then that would spell doom for me. So that's pretty much the battle plan I have going for this one. So with the battle plans over with, let's go directly to the deployment phase. Alright, so starting off with the left-hand deployment for O'Death. Up in the front, he's got 10 pink horrors. Those are the Dunwich horrors. And right behind them, he has his Ogre Thaumaturge, Caliban, the Horror Shepherd of the Waste. And that's a really dangerous tar-pitting unit, ranked up with a character who does a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Does a lot of buffs for that unit of pink horrors, so that's kind of scary to realize he's got that unit there on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, he has his battalion, which is an Arcanite Cabal, which is kind of dangerous. That requires to have 3 characters. He's got 3 of them. He's got his Fate Master in the front. That's Svarfall the weakest. On the left-hand side, he's got his Zangor Shaman, that is Skexes of Dark Crystals, and on the right hand side of him he has his Magister, which is Barnabas the Scrivener. And the crazy part is, so long as these guys are within 9 inches of each other, they can cast 2 spells, 1 additional spells per turn. For these guys, it's 2 spells. And my friend O'Death has decided to put Sorcerer onto his General, so that way he can cast spells as well. So that's kind of dangerous. At the same time, up in the front, he's got the Changelings. That's a unit of 20 Zangor, and Zangor are dangerous no matter how many numbers they come in, so that's a pretty tough unit to crack. And on the right hand side, he has his Chanters of Change, which is a unit of 20 Carrick Acolytes. So pretty heavy right-handed flank, and plus he has his battalion located there as well. Alright, so now it's time for the deployment for the Celestial Vindicators. These are my Lords of Azure Skies. First of all, in the back I have my General Lord Ios of Azure Earth. He's the General, he's the Lord Celestant. He's right there kind of making sure he can give his buffs to all of his units. Right in front of him I have my 5 units of 5-man unit of Judicators. Those are the Witnesses. Those guys are armed with Sky Shock bolts, so they're from my range capacity. On the left hand side I have Orion the Sky Hunter. I'm sorry, right hand side, yeah. Orion the Sky Hunter. That is my Knight Venator is what he's called. He's like the archer character. He's got the Aether Wing as well as the huge bow that does like one-shot things to death if you can get the hit off. So he's there to provide some more range support. On the left-hand side is my newest, one of my newest models I got put in here. That is Icarus, the Lamplighter. He is a Knight Azeroth, so that way he can bring him some buffs to my Judicators. Judicators, if anybody within range of his lantern gets rerolls of 1 to hit, so that's gonna be really important for those guys. Right in the center as well, I got 2 more new leaders that I've included in this army as well. On the left-hand side, that is the Stormbringer. That's Horus the Stormbringer. He is a Knight Vexilor. He's got the Meteoric Standard, so during the hero phase, I can cause a meteor shower to take place. On the right-hand side, that is Jericho the Doomcaller. That is my Knight Heraldor. He's got an awesome trumpet ability. I'm really looking forward to seeing him use that ability against my enemies. And then right at the front, of course, I have my Justicars. That is a unit of 5 Liberators with a Liberator Prime. They're all armed with Sigmar Warhammers as well as shields. Now my other unit of Liberators, the Judges, as well as my Executioners, my 5 Paladin Retributors, my Lord Relictor, which is Lord Grim of Forgotten Lores, as well as my unit of 6 Prosecutors, the Witnesses. Those guys are all off on the side of the table. I plan on bringing them down with the Scions of the Storm ability to kind of put them wherever I need to be at during the battle. And because you can only go 1 for 1 type of deployment using that kind of method. And that pretty much brings up my deployment for this one. So with deployment over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 1 and we roll for initiative. All right, so I managed to win this initiative on this one. So because of that, turn 1 goes to Celestial Vindicators, and we go directly to the hero phase. And since I only have one hero on the table, I spend a command point activating my general's command ability, Lord of Hosts. That way, any unit within 24 inches of him doesn't have to worry about taking battle shock tests, which is really important because this time around, in order to meet the requirements of having more battle line units, I had to cut my unit of Liberators in half. Usually I run a unit of 10 Liberators, but because of 1,500 points, I need 3 battle line units. I had to cut it in half to make it 5. So that's really going to be important for my Liberators, especially since there's only 5 of them in a squad now. And that pretty much makes the hero phase. So with the hero phase over with, we go directly to the move phase, and the very first thing I do is I start advancing my forces. The first thing I do is I advance forward with my Justicars. That unit of 5 Liberators moves up 12 inches. No, it's not 12 inches. 10 inches when they end up moving. I apologize. They moved up so that way they can start making their way towards the objective on the left-hand side as well. And then, of course, right behind them I have my Knight Vexillor, my Knight Venator. Sorry, not my Knight Venator, my Knight... Vexillor, my Knight Heraldor, there we go, as well as my Judicators. I bring them right behind as well, so that way they can lend support, as well as my General. Also, at the same time, I also move up my Knight Azeros. I move up Icarus the Lamplighter. He was within 3 inches of that objective, so now he secured it for the very first turn. Did me a victory point, which is important as well. And then, of course, I have my Orion the Sky Hunter. He is bringing up support as well on the left-hand side as well, so that way he can start shooting at things. The next thing I do is I use my Scions of the Storm ability to start sending my units onto the table. Luckily for me, the 3 units I want to deploy, all of them roll 3 up. So first of all, I deploy my my Justicars. That's my unit of 5 Liberators. I land them right in front of the objective on the left-hand side to act as a speed bump because I'm really worried about my opponents sending those pink horrors my way. And hopefully I can kind of hold them there while the rest of my army catches up to secure that objective. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, I use the Rite of Lightning ability for Lord Grim, the Forgotten Lores. He goes in right behind the objective on objective number 2 on the right-hand side, and then I also bring my Executioners as well to act as a human shield phalanx to protect it as well. I'm really looking forward to running Lord Grim with my Executioners. Hopefully, can buff those guys up and make them even tougher. And that pretty much makes up my move phase on this one. So here's a close-up of the right-hand side. You can see the Justicars are up in the front, protecting my objective with Icarus the Lamplighter coming in right behind to lend up support. Here's a close-up of the rest of my army catching up to support objective number 1. Up in the front, I got my Judges, followed by Horus the Stormbringer, as well as Jericho the Doomcaller. Also in the middle, there's Orion the Skyhunter, and then right behind them is my Lord Celescent on Dracoth. That is Lord Ios of Azure Earth. And on the right-hand side of them, I have my 5 Judicators from the Witnesses. So they're located there as well. So that pretty much makes up my center deployment areas. And here's a close-up of objective number 2, up in the front of my Executioners, followed by Lord Grim of Forgotten Lores. And they're there to net me my 2 victory points on the very first turn. So with move phase out of the way, we go directly to the shooting phase. And in the shooting phase, I take aim with my Judicators from the Jury, as well as Orion the Skyhunter. They open up onto that unit of Zangor because I need to weaken that unit down a little bit before they engage in close combat with my Executioners. So, as you can see there, I managed to inflict 6 wounds in total against this unit, which is basically 3 Zangor, because Zangor are off the chain. They have 2 wounds apiece. They can run and charge. They can fight. They can shoot. They can pretty much do whatever you need to do in a Tzeentch Arcanite army. So if you're running an Arcanite army and you don't have Zangor, you are wrong. You go back and add those guys to your unit. So anyways, most of the damage is actually done by it was kind of like 50-50. 3 wounds came from my Judicators. The other 3 wounds came from my Knight Venator. So far, I'm really like the Knight Venator so far. He's pretty good at shooting. And that pretty much makes up the shooting phase on this one. And since there is no charge phase, because I can't charge at anything, and there is no combat phase, we go directly to the Battle Shock phase. As you see in this photo, my friend Odeth loses about 2 more Zangors from Battle Shock as well, which is really, really helpful for me. So with Battle Shock over with, we go directly to the bottom of turn number 1 for the Tzeentch Arcanites. Alright, so that takes us directly to the bottom of turn number 1 for the Tzeentch Arcanites, and the first thing we go to is the hero phase. So the very first thing that my friend Odeth does, he uses his general's command ability. What it allows him to do is basically roll a d6 for his character, and whatever number pops up, he can re-roll that value if he wants to as well. So he rolled a 5 on this one, so it's pretty much kind of like a lackluster kind of roll, but for that being said, we continue on with the hero phase because he's Tzeentch Arcanites and they cast magic, and their magic never quits, especially since they're bringing a Arcanite Cabal, so that means every single wizard, those three particularly, they can cast one additional spell, which makes them extremely deadly at this point. So let's go ahead and talk about the pain that these guys brought for me. Alright, so the first person he activates first is Barnabas the Scrivener, that's his Magister. He casts his very first spell, which is Bolt of Change. Not only does it hit my unit, but it also causes 3 mortal wounds as well. Kills one of my Justicars from the of my Liberator unit, as well as put a floating wound into another one. And because the rule stipulates any casualties that get slain from this spell, a Chaos Spawn pops up. So you can see there, 3 inches away, a brand new Chaos Spawn arrives on the battle. At the same time, he also casts a Shield of Fate onto his unit of the Tzeentch of Change as well. And since they have 9 Destiny dice still left in their pool, that means that these guys get to reroll their saves of 1 to 3. So makes it really important for these guys to survive, because these guys only have a save roll of 6. So very important, makes them a little bit tougher to kill at the same time. And to make matters even worse, he then activates Skeksis of Dark Crystal, which is his Zangor Shaman. He casts Arcane Bolt upon my unit of my Justicars right there on the left-hand side. Managed to kill another one of my Liberator that had the floating wound, and put another floating wound onto the Liberator Prime as well. So that part was kind of rough. Managed to cause 2 mortal wounds on that part. So I'm losing 2 guys so far from my Justicars. And to make matters even worse, he then casts Boony Mutation off, which is another magic missile spell. It goes off, kills my Liberator, kills another one of my Liberators as well, leaving only 1 guy left, meaning that my total casualty is 4 at that point. And just like that spell stipulates, for every casualty you take, you get also 1 Zangor. So 2 more Zangor pop up on that left-hand side of the table as well. So that was absolutely devastating to see that happen. So, feeling cocky, my friend Odette decides to cast Fold Reality for his Pink Horrors. Now, he successfully cast that unit, but he rolls a d6 to see how many Pink Horrors he adds to the unit. He accidentally rolled a 1, so because of that, that whole unit just gets vaporized right in the blink of an eye. So it's kind of funny. Reality blinks, and that whole unit of Pink Horrors is just absolutely gone, which is kind of nice for me, because that's one less unit for me to worry about. In fact, I was really worried about those Pink Horrors. Man, that really sucked for Odette. He looked really upset when he looked at me when he did that roll. And he uses 1 command point that he had actually to launch his general's command ability, which isn't very much. So because of that, he just kind of was full of regret, because he could have used a command point to re-roll that, but not going to happen for him at this point. So that part was kind of sad for my opponent. But needless to say, he did generate 5 points of power from casting all of his spells, and the reason why that's important is because to summon demons for the Tzeentch army on this one, however number of spells they manage to cast without having it unbound, they get a point, and eventually they can use those points to cash in and bring him in more units. So it looks like he can save up his units still. He has 5 points right now because 5 spells went off without a hitch, and hopefully he can use those spells to bring back more Pink Horrors. I also forgot to show my opponent's Destiny dice as well when we did the deployment. As you can see, he has 9 of them. He has 2 6s, 3 4s, 2 3s, a 2, as well as a 1. And that represents his Destiny dice. So kudos to him. So, now that the hero phase is finally over, because Tzeentch Arcanites, that's what they do, we go directly to the movement phase. As you can see, there's been some real dynamic movement taking place on the table. Starting on the left-hand side, he keeps his 2 Zangor as well as Chaos Spawn right where they're at, because he can't get within 3 inches of an enemy unit, so they're staying right there. He then just moves up his maximum movement allowance for Caliban the Horror Shepherd of the Wastes. He moves up to the left-hand side to support his Chaos Spawn as well as Zangor, to kind of bring the pain to my 1 lone Liberator holding the front of the objective. At the same time, he also advances with runs his Zangor, so the Changelings, those guys move up a whopping 12 inches. He uses one of his Destiny dice in order to make that roll take place. So those guys move forward up to 12 inches right in front of my Executioners as well. So they're about 3 inches away. They're going to make that charge a problem and cause all kinds of pain. At the same time, he also brings up his Arcanite Cabal, so Skeksis of Dark Crystals, Svarthal the Weakest, as well as Barnabas the Magister. They just move up their normal movement allowance right behind the Changelings, so they're still within 9 inches of each other to let each other support. At the same time, Barnabas the Magister, the Scrivener, who's the Magister there in the bottom, he's still within 9 inches to the Tzeentch of Change to the right-hand side. Now, the Tzeentch of Change, they just move up 6 inches. They're well within range to open up with their Sorcerer's Bolts, and since they have a Wizard within 9 inches of them, they can get +1 to hit with those Sorcerer's Bolts as well. So a lot of buffing taking place for the movement phase on this one. Here's a close-up of Odette's Zangors, as well as Chaos Spawn with Caliban the Horror Shepherd of the Waste, getting ready to charge my lone Liberator. And here's a close-up of the Changelings, as well as Svarthal the Weakest, as well as Skeksis of Dark Crystals, ready to bring the pain to my Executioners. And here's a close-up of Barnabas the Scrivener, as well as the Chanters of Change on the right-hand side, really to bring some magical rain down upon my executioners as well. So with the movement phase over with, we go directly to the shooting phase. As you can see in the shooting phase, actually pretty devastating for my unit. Now, I know I only lost one Paladin Retributor, but you also got to remember these guys also have 3 wounds on them as well, and I only have 5 of them, so every single time I lose guy, it's kind of mounting up for my casualties. So the first thing it does is that actually 2 mortal wounds actually went through because they used the banners for the changelings, because they have 2 banners in that unit. So because that 2 mortal wounds went off because there's wizards to support them within range, so I caused 2 mortal wounds onto my one of my Paladin Retributors. Now that whole unit of Chanters of Change, they did open up, all 20 of them, but unfortunately for them, they were only able to slip 1 wound through, and that was enough to kill my last remaining wound for one of my Paladins. So that part was kind of bad. So with shooting phase over with, we go directly to the charge phase. As you see in this photo, my opponent decides to get aggressive. He charges in his 2 summoned Zangor, as well as 1 summoned Chaos Spawn, as well as Caliban the Horror Shepherd of the Waste. Those guys going to surround my lone Justicar from the Liberators in order to take him on, so that's kind of sad. We know exactly how that combat's going to go. And at the same time, my opponent uses another one of his Destiny dice to get a 6 for his Chanters of Change. Those guys roll another 6 for their charge, so because of that, they make their full charge and charge to the right-hand side of my Executioners. At the same time, the Zangor do exactly the same thing, so now the Changelings, as well as the Chanters of Change, are getting my Executioners in a pincer attack. Now, I don't care how tough my Paladin Retributors are, ain't no one going to survive against that many Carrick Alkalites as well as Zangor, so that's kind of rough because my opponent just brought the mass upon my lone unit there. So, in the combat phase, it went about as well as you could possibly expect. My Justicar from that unit got wiped out by, I think it was Caliban of the Wastes, who actually was the one who kind of inflicted the wounds on that part, so that part was kind of sad. I then counterattacked with my Executioners. I did manage to kill 2 members of the Carrick Acolytes, so that part was kind of cool, but for the most part though, most of my attacks were pretty much lackluster. I wasn't able to do anything against the Zangor pretty much. I just flooded my rolls spectacularly for my attacks. It was ridiculous the amount of lack of attacks I actually got off. Needless to say though, the Zangor as well as the Chanters of Change had no problem just sticking the final wounds onto my Executioners and managed to wipe out the entire unit as well. So with the combat phase over with, we go to Battle Shock. And in the Battle Shock phase, my opponent rolled a 1 naturally for his Carrick Alkalites, so because of that, none of them have to break. So with Battle Shock phase over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and Death and I, we roll for initiative to see who goes first. Alright, so that takes the top of turn number 2 for the Celestial Vindicators, and since both of my heroes are still controlling both the objectives, I get 2 points apiece added on to the 2 points I already had on top of that, so now I have a grand total of victory points of 6, so that part is kind of cool as well. However, if I can't hold on to those objectives though, it's not really going to matter how many points I have because Death can bring the pain on me on that part, so oh well, looking at the life glass half full I suppose. So with that little update over with, we go directly to the hero phase. Alright, so in the hero phase, the first thing I do is I take my command point and I use Lord Ios of Azure Earth and have it use one of his secondary command abilities. Since I'm playing Celestial Vindicators and that's one of the storm hosts within the Stormcast Eternal Army, each of the different storm hosts actually have different abilities and different focuses. Now originally I picked the Celestial Vindicators for my army just because I thought the paint scheme looked really cool. I thought it was really unique and it looked interesting and I wanted to use that for my army. Now that I have like the Celestial Vindicators rules have came out, I'm actually kind of glad I picked them because they're meant for combat, they're meant for fighting. In fact, they have a special ability called Driven by Vengeance, which allows them to reroll hits of 1 if they charge that turn into the combat phase, so that part's kind of cool. And it comes with a secondary combat ability, command ability. It's called Righteous Hatred. And basically what happens at the start of the combat phase, I pick a friendly unit that's within 9 inches as engaged in close combat, and they get +1 attacks on melee weapons, which is a huge ability, especially if you use it on a unit that really could definitely use it. So I decided to use the Righteous Hatred ability because I have a feeling that I'll be charging into combat here pretty quickly in order to do that. And so that makes up the hero phase on my left-hand side. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, I do originally try to cast Bless Weapons. I try to cast one of my Battle Prayers upon my Lord Relictor, but unfortunately for me, though, I failed that one, so he doesn't get the additional hits if he rolls 6 or higher. And it's kind of cool, too, because he's armed with the Storm Rage Blade, which gives him 6 attacks, which makes him, pretty beefy in close combat. I then cast the Lightning Storm ability onto the Chanters of Change. It managed to kill 2 of those guys, so that part's kind of cool as well. But Lord Grim, man, he's facing down a lot of Arcanites all by himself, and that's kind of scary. Alright, so that takes us directly to the movement phase. As you can see, I have done some kind of like dynamic movement, really. On the left-hand side, I move up my judges of my 5-man Liberator squad. I move them up closer so that way they were within charge range of the Chaos Spawn. Also, they can kind of secure objective number 1 there on the left-hand side. At the same time, I also move Icarus, the lifeliner. I move him just a normal amount of inches to get within 3 inches of Caliban, the Horrorship of the Waste, because I want to bring that guy down in close combat. Meanwhile, I bring in my 2 heroes as well, my Knight Vexillor as well as my Knight Heraldor, which is Horus the Stormbringer as well as Jericho the Doomcaller. I move them up just a normal moon allowance so that way they're within range of their abilities. I also move up Lord Ios of Azure Earth as well, so that way he can use the Stormcaller ability on his Dracoth during the shooting phase. On the right hand side, I do move up Orion the Skyhunter. I fly him up over to the other side of that hill so that way he has a nice line of sight shot firing from his position directly at my enemy's general. At the same time, I also kind of shuffle down my my adjudicators from the witnesses, from the jury, so that way they have a good line of sight shots at the Zangor as well, so that way they can do some shooting if they need to. And then finally, I use my Ride the Lightning ability to summon up my prosecutors. So you can see that I got my witnesses. All 5 of them land about 9 inches away from Barnabas the Scrivener in my enemy's deployment area. And that pretty much makes the move phase on this one. Alright, so here's a close of my forces. I got Icarus the Lamplighter. He's going to fly directly into Caliban, the Horrorship of the Waste, and fight that guy in close combat. I also have my judges as well, bring up support because they're going to charge into the Zangor, as well as the Chaos Spawn that got newly summoned. There's a close of Lord Ios of Azure Earth, as well as Horus the Stormbringer, as well as Jericho the Doomcaller, and also Orion the Skyhunter, ready to bring the pain as well. And then right behind them, of course, I have my jury lining up to take shots at the Chanters of Change, as well as the Changelings. And here's a close-up of Lord Grimm of Forgotten Lores. He's got to stand his ground because I need to get the points, so, you know, kudos to him. And here's a close-up of the witnesses getting ready to charge into Barnabas the Scrivener and hopefully just kind of screw up my enemy's Arcanite Cabal by taking out the characters and just character assassinating them. So that with the move phase over with, we go directly to the shooting phase. And the shooting phase is actually pretty awesome on this part. I use my General Stormcaller ability for him to bring the pain. He opened up with his lightning breath directly into the middle of the units, and he rolled for his inches. I managed to hit Caliban, the Horrorship of the Waste, as well as those 2 Zangor, as well as the the Chaos Spawn as well. Managed to inflict 2 mortal wounds on each of those guys. So I put 2 mortal wounds on Caliban the Waste as well as the Chaos Spawn and wiped out those 2 Zangor as well. So I would have used the Shriving Light ability on my Knight Azeroth, but unfortunately for him though, he was not in range during the hero phase. So hopefully if my Knight Azeroth survives the next combat round, I can definitely use that ability and bring the pain. Same thing with the Meteoric Storm ability from my Knight Vexillor as well. That'd be kind of cool to use that and see how that works. Meanwhile, over here on the right-hand side, I take aim with my the members of the jury, have them cut loose their Sky Shock bows. Managed to kill out 6 of the Chanters of Change as well, which is pretty awesome. My opponent still has to roll, basically couldn't get any armor saves because of the -1 to rend. So because of that, managed to wipe out 6 of those guys, which is kind of cool as well. And then for the very first time, I used Jericho the Doomcaller, which is my Knight Heraldor for the very first time. He lets loose the Trumpet Blast, managed to put 2 mortal wounds onto the units within 3 inches of that forest, which is kind of cool as well. Luckily for me, Orion was just a half inch shy of being hit by that ability, so got pretty lucky on that part. So Orion the Skyhunter managed to survive that. So I managed to kill 1 Zangor as well as put 2 mortal wounds onto Skexes of Dark Crystals, which is kind of awesome as well. And the next thing I do is I take Orion the Skyhunter and I make him use his Star Fated Shot, where he gets 1 shot off and causes D6 plus 3 wounds, and he manages to take aim at the Fate Master, Swarfall the weakest. He lets loose, hits him, wounds him, and also causes 7 wounds on that guy. So right off the table, I just sniped my enemy general right off the table. So that part was kind of cool as well. And then my witnesses from my my prosecutors, they threw their Celestial Hammers, put 2 wounds onto Skexes of Dark Crystals as well. So that guy's packing 6 wounds, who's only 2 wounds shy of being dead, which is kind of cool. So with the shooting phase over with, we go directly to the charge phase. As you can see in this photo, I decided to charge forward with my Liberators. For my the judges, they charge directly into the Chaos Spawn. I bring up my Knight Vexillor as well as my Knight Heraldor, Jericho the Doomcaller, and Horus the Stormbringer. Move those guys over to lend support as well to take on that Chaos Spawn. At the same time, I also charge in with Icarus the Lamplighter as well as Lord Ios of Azure Earth. Those guys charge in to deal with Caliban, the Horror Shepherd of the Waste, to fight that guy. And then I decided to use my Righteous Hatred command ability. I decided to put that onto my Liberators, so that way those guys have +1 to their attacks during this turn. So with that being said, that's kind of cool. At the same time, on the right-hand side, I charge in Orion the Skyhunter. He charged directly into Skeksis of Dark Crystals, so now those two are engaged in close combat. And then my Prosecutors rolled, I think, an 11 is what they end up rolling. So because of that, my Prosecutors charge in to surround Barnabas the Scrivener and take that guy out in close combat as well. So with the charge phase over with, we go directly to the combat phase. So over here in the combat phase, needless to say, my my Liberators, when they got that +1 additional attack, man, these guys just kind of took it to this spot and just, you know, pounded him back to his basic baser parts. Basically, it was kind of cool to see the amount of damage he did. Unfortunately, though, I did lose one of my Liberators in the process of fighting, so that part was kind of sad. But at the same time, it's kind of neat to see the Liberators just unload on that Chaos Spawn and kill him. Now the fight between what's his name, Icarus and Lamplighter, as well as Caliban the Waste, was kind of like a wash. He wasn't able to cause any wounds to me. I was able to cause any wounds to him, so that was kind of lackluster. However, as you can see in this photo, the Caliban, the Horror Ship of the Wastes, got destroyed by my Lord Silicon and Dracoth. That Tempestos hammer, man, that thing has no regard for human life. It just smashed that guy into oblivion, so that part was kind of cool as well. So that makes the combat phase here on the left-hand side. And over here on the right-hand side for the combat phase, my Orion the Skyhunter had no problem just putting on the last 2 wounds on Skeksis of Dark Crystals, managed to take him out as well. And also my Prosecutors, man, they just tore apart Barnabas the Scrivener as well. That Grand Hammer is no joke when you use it to strike down fools, so that part was kind of neat as well. So in the Battle Shock phase, I roll for my Bravery. I don't manage to lose any one of my Liberators, so my Liberators are still 4 strong, so that part was kind of cool. Over on the right-hand side, the Zangor don't break because that's what Zangor do best. However, 5 members of the Chanters of Change, those guys ran away just because they failed their bravery test on that part. And with that being said, we go directly to the bottom of turn number 2 for the Tzeentch Arcanites. And it's at this point that my opponent, Odette, decides to surrender the game. In order to win this scenario, you need to have heroes or behemoths in order to grab the objectives. And since all of his heroes are dead, he has no way of actually securing any of his objectives as well. And since most of his army is pretty much killed off the table, he decides to surrender at that point. And that brings me a victory on this one. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go directly to the after action report because this battle report is now officially over.
Sure, I could have stayed in the past. Could have even been king. But in my own way, I am king. Hail to the king, baby.
Alright, so with that being said, it goes directly to the after action report. This is the part of the battle report we talk about what went well, what went poorly, and what we can learn for the next time that we do battle. This is the after action report for Age of the Realms, battle report number 35, ended being a victory for yours truly. So, in the end, when it came to the victory points, I managed to score 6 victory points, while my friend Odette was able to score any victory points. When it came to the losses, I lost 2 units this time. I lost the Justicars, my Liberator unit, as well as my Executioners. As for Odette's losses, he lost Sparfall the Weakest, Barnabas the Scrivener, Skeksis of Dark Crystals, Caliban the Horror Ship of the Waste, as well as the Dunwich Horrors. And the first thing I gotta say is, what a difference 500 points makes to an army. I'm really satisfied with all the new characters I've added to this army as well as some of the things that they can do as well. For example, Icarus, for example, my light Azeroth, the buffing abilities he does for shooting, helping guys reroll rolls of 1 when they do their shooting is extremely beneficial for Stormcast Eternals because, let's face it, Stormcast Eternals shooting is mediocre at the best of times. Not to mention that Orion, the Skyhunter, my knight Venator, his shooting ability is super powerful. Not just his normal shooting abilities with his regular realm bow, as well as his Star Eagle, but also that fate shot that he has with his arrows, where he can take out heroes and monsters, dishing out D6 plus 3 damage. That thing is freaking out of sight. He just one-shot at my opponent's general like he wasn't even there, so that part is kind of cool as well. Not to mention Jericho the Doomcaller, my knight herald, with his trumpet ability, able to dish out mortal wounds, can be extremely useful. When you play Stormcast Eternal armies, have a really hard time dishing out mortal wounds for the most part. So because of that, having that's going to really help me out to kind of mitigate that weakness as well. I haven't got a chance to use Horus, the Stormbringer, or Icarus's Shriving Light abilities with his lanterns because I just didn't have a hero phase to activate them in. But I'm really looking forward to see what those guys can do, what kind of pain they can bring to the battlefield as well. One of the things that was a waste, however, was 5-man units of Liberators. They're not very good. They have a really hard time surviving. Liberators are just kind of like average at the best of times. So putting them in units of 5 really made him fragile, made him die too easily. So hopefully when I can solve that problem when I get to higher point levels. Right now I just need to have them around because that's all I can squeeze in for 500 additional points. It's just 2 5-man units to meet my battle line requirements. Even with that being said though, Tzeentch Arcanites are still no joke when it comes to the hero phase. I remember playing those guys a couple of months back when I was playing Age of Sigmar with Tzeentch Arcanites. They're extremely powerful in the magic phase, especially the list that I have built up, which is the same list of my friend Odette the Side of the Rock. Those guys can really use magic all the time, and that really took it to me. I have no rule with defense against it. I don't have any wizards that can unbind spells in my army, so because of that, I might have to look at my army and try to fix that part, but for right now I'm just having fun just having these guys charge in and doing combat. Plus also to talk about the battle as well, those pink horrors, the Dunwich horrors, when they blinked out reality like that, when they tried to use their full reality spell and have backfired, that really helped me out this battle. It made me possible for me to secure both objectives very, very quickly and to earn my victory points. If it wasn't for that, this battle probably would have even ended up as a tie or could have gone entirely the other way, because once those pink horrors wiped out, about a third of my enemy's army was just gone off the battle. So that really helped out as well. As always, this was an awesome game, excellent opponent. I'm looking forward to the rematch. As always, you guys, please feel free to comment, like, and or subscribe. You guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Google+, as well as blogger.com for all latest news about our hobby. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one with our Mighty Empires campaign. You guys stay classy. We will catch you in the next one. Peace out, you guys.